Machine intelligence is the last invention that humanity will ever need to make. But, as Dave Water says, a baby learns to crawl, walk, and then run, and we are still in the crawling stage when it comes to applying machine learning. Hi, I'm Gauri Vaidya, and I will be presenting along with my colleague Louisa Ilk our research paper titled HyperEstimator, Evolving Computationally Efficient Convolutional Neural Network Models with Grammatical Evolution. This research work is a collaborative work between me, Louisa Ilk, Meghna Khirsagar, Enrique Nerdo, and Connor Ryan at Biocomputing and Developmental Systems Group, University of Limerick, Ireland. With computational advancements into the areas of deep learning and big data, researchers have been able to design special neural networks for image analysis tasks called as convolutional neural networks or CNNs. These models have achieved and are even rapidly expanding into the areas right from object detection towards finding solutions to as complex problems as medical analysis, climate change, and even autonomous driving. Despite of such large power of CNNs, it is equally expensive and computationally complex to train a CNN model from scratch for a given dataset. To address this issue, much research has been done into the area of developing large pre-trained models that can be used for transfer learning. Transfer learning has achieved significant results while training on a custom dataset. However, as the dataset changes, we still need to tune the model parameters and model hyperparameters. Model parameters are variable in nature and they get updated as the model learns during the training process, while the hyperparameters are fixed and explicitly defined before the training process. Hyperparameters have a direct impact on the training process and hence tuning them is crucial as well as of great interest to the researchers. This inspired us to explore into the direction of tuning hyperparameters with a data-driven approach. We wanted to design an approach that can possibly use less resources for computation, smaller amounts of data for hyperparameter tuning, flexible to variants of hyperparameters, while also ensuring the interpretability of the entire process. With this research question, we analyzed the literature and got some interesting insights.
As we have heard earlier, performance of a CNN is not only affected by the layer design, but also by other hyperparameters such as activation function, normalization method, learning rate, etc. One of the most difficult aspects of using CNN-based approaches is determining the best hyperparameters to use. The authors of the paper, Hyperparameter Optimization for Convolutional Neural Network Communities based on evolutionary algorithms, argue that there seems to be no reliable ways to identify third network architectures that could contribute to big performance gains. The traditional hyperparameter optimization technique is based on experience. The problem with the storyline-error approach is the broad variety of hyperparameter optimization, demanding a lot of computational resources and time. Therefore, a lot of research has been done in this field to automate the process of finding the optimal hyperparameters. The most well-known methods include grid search, random search, Bayesian optimization, and evolutionary algorithms. Evolutionary algorithms combine the idea of random search and Bayesian optimization, where each possible solution reflects a point in the hyperparameter space. This technique is particularly suited for optimization problems over high-dimensional variable spaces, because maintaining several individuals, which are the potential solutions, results in exploring several solutions in parallel. A number of studies have proposed different techniques using evolutionary algorithms to design and optimize neural networks. For example, in 2002, the approach NEAT, which stands for Neural Evolution for Augmenting Topology, was proposed. It is used to evolve the structure of a neural network with its weights. NEAT has proven to be successful in generating structure and weights for relatively small recurrent networks. In 2008, the authors of the work Neural Network Construction and Training Using Grammatical Evolution present a grammar to build and train neural network using grammatical evolution. The used grammar specifies the topology of the network as well as the parameter weights, inputs, and bias. This research only involved two-layer networks which were tested on classification and regression problems. The proposed method in 2015 combines genetic algorithms and grammatical evolution. Specifically, grammatical evolution is used to present the network topology, while genetic algorithms encodes the connection weight. Similar to the previous study, this method also grades feed-forward a diffusion neural network with only one hidden layer. An extension to NEAT is DeepNEAT, which is a method to involve network topology and hyperparameters of deep neural networks. However, the resulting networks are frequently complex and unprincipled. Consequently, this method was improved in 2017. The variant called CoDeepNEAT was created. This approach was tested on involving convolutional neural networks. In contrast to DeepNEAT, CoDeepNEAT is capable of exploring more diverse and deeper architectures. In 2018, Denser was introduced, which is a method for evolving deep neural networks. It combines genetic algorithm and grammatical evolution in order to involve sequences of layers and their parameters. The parameters are encapsulated in the position of a genetic algorithm genotype, which makes the use of genetic operators easier. In their study, they applied this approach to CNNs with remarkable results. In fact, it outperforms previous state-of-the-art evolutionary concepts to generate CNNs, such as CoDeepNEAT, in terms of accuracy. In the same year, 2018, the authors of the paper Evolutionary Design of Convolutional Neural Networks for Human Activity Recognition in Sensor-Rich Environments used grammatical evolution in order to generate the optimal topology of a CNN along with many of its hyperparameters. Since the computational complexity of training and evaluating a CNN model is very high, a proxy was used to estimate the CNN performance. In particular, the fitness of a CNN model were evaluated on a drastically reduced number of epochs and training samples. As a result, the improved CNN model outperformed earlier state-of-the-art findings, which inspired us to design a data-driven approach.
Out of all the literature study as analyzed, even when they were getting promising results, there was a trade-off of higher computational resources and a lack of explainability. Hence, in this research paper, we propose HyperEstimator, comprising of a suite of machine learning algorithms to find the optimal hyperparameters for a CNN architecture. We propose this approach for a CNN architecture for image classification task and test our results against real-world and benchmark datasets. Now, let us look at the pipeline of our proposed approach. The first sub-process of HyperEstimator is exploring the hyperparameter search space with grammatical evolution. Grammatical evolution is a type of evolutionary algorithm inspired by the process of human evolution. Similar to how human beings evolve, the individuals or the population of the algorithm undergo reproduction, carrying the best genetic information of the parents and evolving over the generations based on the principle of survival of the fittest. These individuals compete for survival, finding solution for a given problem from the search space and are evaluated in each generation for their performance. Now, grammatical evolution reduces this search space by an intelligent approach with incorporating human knowledge in the form of Backus-Naur form grammar, which is a standard form of a context-free grammar. With the mapping process of BNF grammar, the individuals are able to achieve the solution within limited generations and in a human interpretable way, as this mapping process can be tracked in the form of derivation trees. So, in HyperEstimator, the search space on the hyperparameter is converted to Backus-Naur form or BNF grammar. The choices for hyperparameters are extracted from the literature for the task of image classification. Then, a sample of 5% from the entire dataset is fed to the CNN architecture, which undergoes evolution with GE framework. The performance of the individuals over the generations is tracked and collected in a CSV file and then used for the analysis of a second supervised machine learning model, that is, the regression model. Regression model is a machine learning technique that maps the relation between features and the predicted variable. In HyperEstimator, regression model results into an equation mapping the relation between hyperparameter values, which are features, and the accuracy of the CNN model, which is the predictor variable. The equation obtained through regression is then fed to the next supervised machine learning model, that is the Bayesian optimizer. Bayesian optimizer works on the principle of maximizing the objective function given the model and its search space. In HyperEstimator, Bayesian optimizer finds the optimal configuration for hyperparameters using the regression model. The CNN model is then trained over the entire dataset with the optimal hyperparameters obtained. Now, let us discuss this approach with our experimental setup. In order to test the approach against the real-world scenarios, we collected 6 videos of 1 minute each, 3 from daytime and 3 from nighttime from some Indian cities. When we analyzed the videos, we found that the common classes observed in the videos were bicycle, motorcycle, car, truck, van, pedestrian, and when no vehicle is seen on the road, we name it as background. Therefore, we have used these classes in our dataset for HyperEstimator. We combined 4 different open source datasets containing these 7 classes with equal number of images in each class. Each class consists of 5,000 images and the total size of dataset is 35,000 across 7 classes. We used 80% of the data for training and 20% for testing. During the training process, we also augmented the dataset with horizontal flip, vertical flip, and rotation with 90 degrees. A basic CNN architecture was used, pre-trained with VGG16 model over ImageNet weights. 70% of the model was freeze during the training process, while only 30% was fine-tuned. The last layer of the model was modified with softmax layer to classify the image in one of the 7 classes. For the CNN architecture, we chose 3 hyperparameters, that is, learning rate, batch size, optimizer, and defined the search space for each of them by studying the literature. The parameters were selected for running the G experiments such that to reduce the computational resources, hence we kept the population size and the generation size as minimum. As the objective was to maximize the performance of the CNN model over unseen dataset, we used the validation accuracy as the fitness function for G. After completing the evolutionary process, here is the sample metadata collected over the 5th generation, where optimizer, learning rate, and batch size are the features, while validation accuracy is the predictor variable. As the optimizer column was categorical in nature, we used label encoding for converting it to numerical values. The processed metadata was then fitted with the regression model and resulted into this equation giving the bias term and the coefficient values for hyperparameters. We then optimized the parameters of the regression model, which are in our case the hyperparameters of the CNN model, with a Bayesian optimizer and found the optimal values for each of the hyperparameters. The best found values were Adam for optimizer, learning rate of 0.000001 and a batch size of 16. Using these hyperparameters, we trained the model over the entire dataset for 40 epochs. To compare our approach against state-of-the-art results, we also trained our model using the standard values of the hyperparameters obtained from the literature for road traffic image classification dataset. The graphs on the screen show the performance of both of these approaches over the training process. From the results, we can see a significant improvement in validation accuracy and validation loss when the model is trained with hyperparameters tuned with HyperEstimator as against without it. When we analyze the performance of both of these models against each class with confusion metrics, The model tuned with HyperEstimator has outperformed the one in the literature. However, when we further analyze the results, we can see that the accuracy of the bicycle class is relatively low and the model is misclassifying the images as either pedestrian or motorcycle. Now, this is due to the fact that the images for bicycle and pedestrian were very blurred in the training dataset, and the model is misclassifying them as either motorcycle or pedestrian due to the similar visual structure. We validated the performance of HyperEstimator against two tests, one with benchmark datasets and other on the real-world scenarios. For benchmark datasets, we used two datasets, CIFAR10 and CIFAR100. CIFAR10 contains 1000 images per class, while CIFAR100 contains 100 images per class for testing. Our dataset overlapped with two classes against CIFAR10, that is car and truck, and three classes against CIFAR100, that is bicycle, motorcycle, and truck. From the results in the table, we can see that the model is competitive for each of the class for benchmark datasets. The video dataset we collected over some of the Indian cities was used for testing against real-world scenarios. We extracted 10 frames for each of the classes, thus a total of 70 frames across 7 classes. We tested the accuracy against each class, and from the confusion metrics, we observed a competitive performance with low performance for pedestrians and background classes. The model degraded for pedestrian class due to image blurriness, but for background class, we infer that there was a major difference between the background images used for training and the background images used for testing process, as we show as an example image. However, the results emphasize the performance of the proposed approach against benchmark and real-world scenarios. The machine learning algorithms used also ensured interpretability. The hyperparameters values evolved with grammatical evolution can be visualized in the form of derivation trees, while the performance of Bayesian optimizer can also be visualized in the form of graphs to track the performance of the optimization process. For training the CNN model, TensorFlow and Keras library was used using NVIDIA GPU Quadro RTX 8000. Pony G2 was used for evolutionary experiments. Regression was performed using the StatsModel library in Python, while HyperOpt library was used for Bayesian optimization. To summarize, we propose HyperEstimator, an approach to optimize CNNs with hyperparameter tuning that is able to achieve the research objectives we started with. The approach is using less computational power and less amount of data for tuning hyperparameters, as we are able to achieve this with only 5% of sample dataset over 5 epochs. The resulting approach is interpretable, and the performance of the model resulted into competitive results against real-world scenarios and 2 benchmark datasets. The immediate future scope for HyperEstimator is to extend the hyperparameters and using this approach for more complex tasks with CNN, such as object detection. Though we are still crawling and using machine intelligence, we strongly believe that with continual efforts, it will be soon when we will be running with machine intelligence to create a better future for the world. Thank you for your patient listening. Here goes some of our selected references. And we are now open for questions.